I'm Osborne Foreman, and in this portfolio update I'm going to talk about Argo Blockchain and why, despite the 44% dip from all-time highs, that I'm planning to continue building this position. And if you like the video, please drop one of these, support the channel. According to Google Finance, the FTSE 100 is up 1.5%. The FTSE 250 is up 1.22%, and as of recording this video, the S&P 500 was up around 1.4%. I'll put the updated version up there. Judging by the sentiment in the markets this week, it seems like there's a lot of positivity around the economic outlook, and that could be a large contributing factor as to why we've seen quite a strong move in the markets this week. However, my portfolio has done the complete opposite and has massively underperformed the indexes for this week. My portfolio has dropped by 2.76%. However, despite this poor quality week, and my shares, or one of my shares, has dropped by quite a considerable amount, I'm in fact not concerned in the slightest, and I feel that this could be a pivotal moment in the terms of the portfolio, as this could be either an opportunity in which the returns of my portfolio can be greatly increased, or I could fall flat and fall for the sunk cost fallacy. I hope that it's at least a very good learning experience that I get to learn at a young age, so that in the future, if I see this again, I may be able to have better decision making and therefore risk a lot less capital overall. As I feel that right now, with the portfolio, there's a critical decision that could be made. One of them could be that I continue buying the dip and that I may fall fault to the sunk cost fallacy. Another version of this could be that I decide to keep hands off, ignore the position and wait for the recovery. But this means that if it does recover, that I could have missed out on the opportunity of buying more, but the safe side of that I don't overexpose myself to the position if it does continue to fall. This stock is Argo Blockchain, and this is by far the top diver in the portfolio this week, dropping by 35.1%, which is, I think, the biggest move I've ever had by an investment since starting the portfolio. Whereas the second top diver is Halma, changing or falling by 0.31%. So you can really see a massive volatility difference this week. This isn't unusual to see with commodity-based miners, as typically the share price of these miners are based on the future expectations or price multiples of future revenue and earnings. And so if Bitcoin were to have dropped, this would make a lot of sense, as Bitcoin would drop and then Argo Blockchain would likely have a lot more volatility and also drop as well, which means that they may drop by further as their future revenue is depicted by the price of Bitcoin, and if it drops and continues to drop, it means their future revenue is perhaps going to be less. And that pushes or that pulls down their price multiple. However, this week Bitcoin had actually risen, which could be concerning for some ARB shareholders, as you may be confused. Why has Argo Blockchain dropped whilst Bitcoin has risen? Surely it should have gone up overall. And I have a few suspicions on why ARB has actually fallen rather than risen, and I will share them with you. If you're interested in seeing my live portfolio activity updates, my entire stock market watch list, and stocks to buy, then click the link in the description down below and sign up to my Patreon. We haven't seen any news on Argo Blockchain in the last week. This means that fundamentally, or the intrinsic value of Argo Blockchain has not changed massively, the only difference being the price of Bitcoin. In this point, this would mean that if we had a news item that perhaps impacted the business, then it would be expected to see similar volatility or perhaps a lot less volatility than what we have seen in the last 5 days. We've not had news, and therefore fundamentals have not changed. I want to bring up a report that they had released on April 7th on their operational update on how much Bitcoin they had mined. In the month of March, they had mined 165 Bitcoin compared to just 129 Bitcoin in February. Furthermore, on this Bitcoin, when converted to cash, which they haven't done, but as for the purpose of understanding, they had a mining margin of 84% compared to just 81% in February, which I think is very impressive. Furthermore, they've increased the number of Bitcoin on their balance sheet and increased their hodl by 700, well, they now have in total 764 Bitcoin on the balance sheet. These are all very positive factors that could very much push the share price up, and I think could be one of the critical drivers for growth. What is interesting to see is that Q1 is now the company's most profitable quarter to date, and I think it's largely going to continue if we see Bitcoin continue to rise or even further expansion of their mining capacity, which they have a lot of plans in the works. I have my suspicions, and I think that recently we did see the IPO of Coinbase, and at which point they were valued at, prior to the public offering, they were valued at around $100 billion. I personally felt that was a bit too much, but I can't really comment on the US markets as I do not hold any stocks. Since then, in the last few days, we have seen this drop to perhaps a more fair evaluation of $65 billion. And across the board, the Bitcoin miners, such as Argo Blockchain or Marathon Patent Group, they have also dropped by around 25% with Marathon and around 15% with Riot. So one could suggest that across the industry or across the board, the industry has had a sweep of low investor sentiment, and that could be one of the main reasons that Argo Blockchain share price has decreased. A suspicion that I've seen others mention quite frequently and is very much understandable is the limitations of the UK market and how the UK markets may be letting Argo Blockchain down. The idea is there's not enough investor hype or capital available in these UK markets, meaning that the price effectively stagnates and it doesn't push up much further. And at least compared to the US, the UK markets are most definitely inferior. That's because the general public, at least for the most part, believe that investing in the stock market is gambling. And in the US, it's quite commonplace, as far as I'm aware, for families to invest, or at least in their 401ks. Although despite this, I don't think this is the case in the UK markets. Whilst ARB is in a very unique situation, as they are the only cryptocurrency miner listed on the London Stock Exchange, I still feel that there is adequate capital and investor hype that could push up the price of ARB on its own. Instead, I feel that this is actually related to their over-the-counter or OTCQX listing, which is in the US, and I believe that this is actually pulling the share price down. And this could be for a few various reasons, but because they are listed on this variant of NASDAQ, I believe, they are exposed to fees. And I believe with some brokers this is $6.95, which would sound quite standard if you use Hargreaves Lansdown, for instance, but then it's also important to recognise that the likes of Webull and Robinhood don't have access to ARBKF. There's a lot of retail investor hype that Argo Blockchain has not yet tapped into, and it's understandable that shares are dropping by perhaps more than the likes of Riot or Marathon that are much more easily accessible, so more people can buy in. We may also be seeing large institutional investors taking profits and selling their positions, which could certainly be pushing the price down as there's more selling pressure than buying demand, and slowly but surely pushes the price down. However, I have limited knowledge on this subject, and so I am only really speculating. I'm also not aware of how to track this other than briefly looking at Simply Wall Street, in which I can see the institutional shareholders and how their positions have changed since their last update, and I don't have a level 2 console if that would give me further information that would be important here. However, a channel, if you haven't already heard of them, is Mateus from Funky Finance, and he'll be able to explain this much better than I can, so I'll leave a link to his channel in the description down below. However, whilst I could continue speculating as to why the share price of Argo is down, such as perhaps the sour taste left in the mouths after the share dilution in March, or the likes of the direct to sell by Peter, the CEO, earlier in the month, I'd rather talk about why I'm buying more shares of Argo Blockchain and why I think the price will increase. This week I bought 406 more shares of ARB, which may sound like a small amount to those of you that have much more capital than me, But for the size of my portfolio, I think that's quite a large amount. This brings my total Argo Blockchain holding to 2,225 shares at an average cost basis of £2.2552. So yeah, a lot of 2s and 5s. However, 1,068 shares of this position are a complete free ride. These were from my affiliate marketing income when I had referred users to sign up to Trading 212. I invested this money in Argo Blockchain at an average price of around £1 per share, and then transferred this position when they were around £2.30 per share into my Freetrade ISA. Speaking of which, if you'd like to sign up to Freetrade, click the link in the description down below and you can get a free share worth up to £200. So whilst I'm down 30% on my total position in this portfolio, I feel that it basically wipes out the returns of the affiliate marketing investment in the first place. So technically I'm not down at all, but that might be a way of looking at it to say, this might be a way of denial in fact the way I'm looking at it, as I'm kind of disregarding that I'm down. This could also explain as to why I'm so calm about the drop, although I personally prefer dips in the market as they allow for perhaps a fairer valuation and they effectively allow to de-risk, as then you can buy in at a much cheaper price. I feel very confident on the outlook of Argo Blockchain. This is because they've demonstrated or even shown that they have competitive advantages, such as being much more efficient or having much higher margins than their competitors or peers in the industry, such as Riot or Marathon, which I believe aren't even profitable, although I don't dive into these companies as they are in the US, and so I could be very much wrong. Whereas Argo Blockchain very much is profitable, although it's understandable as they are using their profits, or they're just mining Zcash, for instance, selling that and then buying more Bitcoin where available, which could mean more share dilutions could be on the way in the more distant future. It's understandable as to why the likes of Marathon or Riot are valued much higher, as US hype is obviously a lot higher, but also the fact that they're valued based on the future capacity that they'll have, and they do have very ambitious plans for much higher petahash capacity and mining efficiencies, and the amount of Bitcoin that Marathon is hodling, which is a lot. But I strongly believe that Argo Blockchain is under the radar in the US. This brings me on to the NASDAQ listing, which is a possibly very huge listing, or perhaps a huge opportunity that could mean that Argo Blockchain gets exposure to the US retail investors and perhaps more well known to institutions. This listing or uplisting could certainly bring a lot of potential and could see Argo Blockchain and their plans and their hodl valued more accurately against their peers. This could be perhaps a bag or 100% gain or more from the current price. Whilst this hasn't been confirmed, I personally speculate or suspect that they have applied for this process as they are dual listed on the OTCQX market, and that during this period they aren't allowed to talk about it. And so that's why they've been suspiciously quiet on the whole matter, and it may mean that once it's approved or denied that they will then comment on it at that time. This is because they have reached the eligibility requirements, and so it would make sense that they would apply for this, as this gives them much more potential for capital investments. And as they are dual listed, I think it's a very natural path to follow, especially if people are believing that the London Stock Exchange is perhaps at its limit for ARB. I also found it very interesting when they had tweeted on their Twitter that they had reached a £1 billion market capitalization, as I believe this is one of the requirements for a NASDAQ listing. Although during my research I found conflicting information on the requirements of listing on the NASDAQ, whether there's a difference between listing purely from nothing or from uplisting from the OTC over-the-counter markets. If you have any more information on this, I'd really appreciate it if you comment down below for other viewers as well. But please be aware that any links you post will be detected as spam and may not be seen. So if you have it, I would appreciate the sources, but also keep that in mind that links aren't working. But I have limited knowledge on these NASDAQ requirements, and so whilst I think they're eligible, I'm not entirely sure. I've heard places where $2 the share price is enough, $3 is enough, or even $5. I thought it would be closer related to the market capitalization. As I said, this is where I have limited knowledge on, but I would love to learn more before I do expand into US stock. Argo Blockchain also has this 25% stake in Pluto, which is expected or anticipated to IPO shortly and perhaps in the next few months. This could certainly see an uplift in the price, as Pluto could have been undervalued pre-IPO when they acquired it, and then if they have a strong IPO, this could be promising and perhaps lift up the underlying fundamentals of Argo Blockchain, as the valuation of Pluto would be higher. As Pluto are a crypto venture capital firm that invests in digital assets, I think they bring some good diversification inside the cryptocurrency space, but also distance themselves from the likes of mining Bitcoin. I'd also like to mention the facility in Texas, which is planned to run on entirely renewable energy. This gives lots of room for the future and even much more mining capacity. As of present, they have plans in the next 12 months to have a 200 megawatt facility available for mining, but this whole land area, or what is it, 300 acres of land in Texas, can also provide up to 800 megawatts of mining capacity overall, so there's a lot of potential for growth in the future. And they also believe this area to have some of the lowest electricity rates in the entire world, which all sounds promising when combined with the Pluto IPO, the amount of Bitcoin they're hodling. It certainly seems fueled for growth, and it still seems very much undervalued. My position with Argo Blockchain originally was a swing trade, and it could still be. This is because I largely expect the Nasdaq listing to massively improve the share price. I say massively, perhaps double the share price, and then be at a point where I could sell a portion of that position and then invest it into my more longer term holds. This is because I don't believe in the the adoption of long-term Bitcoin. Perhaps that's because I know too little about it, or perhaps I disagree with people's views on the matter. And this is just my opinion, by the way. Please don't take it as this will happen, because it's not. I'm just a 21-year-old talking about investing in finance. But I feel that since it doesn't align with my long-term visions, that it probably isn't best to hold as a long-term stock. But more recently, I've sort of came more exposed to the world through holding Argo Blockchain, and I kind of like the perspective of it. I still don't feel that in that realistic part of my mind that it really could be adopted in the future, and if central governments, for instance, would really allow this to happen as they kind of lose control. I do believe in digital currencies, but I don't know if this would be the way. However, I would still like an exposure to crypto, just because diversification is protection against ignorance. And in this regard, I would like diversification because I could be very much ignorant. But there are so many good parts of the company of Argo Blockchain, and so many good things for it, such as that Texas facility running on renewable energy, cheapest rates in the world. They're hodling more Bitcoin, so their exposure to it is even greater. And the fact that they have so much plans for higher mining capacity and greater efficiency and higher margins, that I feel that this is a story that is really worth being invested into. And so that swing trade may become more of a long-term hold. At least for the medium term, I can understand the institutional hype and the prices being pushed up. I very much believe Bitcoin will go up. I don't know if it will go as high as 100,000, but I certainly do think it has some upside potential. And so I would like that exposure, as well as that Nasdaq listing. I would then hopefully take profits, but then still hold that core position of Argo Blockchain. But this is likely to change as time comes, because I say this now, but I might believe more in the company when I hear more about it, or become more researched so that my conviction is higher. As for the rest of the portfolio, it has done very well this week, and in fact it's only really Argo Blockchain that's dragging me down. For instance, my two biggest positions, such as Boohoo, is up by 3.74%, and the likes of Games Workshop is also up by 4.84%. Despite mentioning last week that I was planning to build a cash position, yeah, I was very much wrong about that. I didn't realize how instantly I may need to use that, and so I have used the majority of that cash position to top up on Argo Blockchain, which presents that potential risk if my decision making is wrong, and if, for instance, it is a sunk cost fallacy, and I'm speculating, but perhaps if Argo Blockchain didn't go well, then this could be a mistake and that cash position could be an error. But only time will tell in that regard, and I'm confident on the likes of Argo Blockchain, and that is why I am buying more. I've spoken in the past about my thoughts on Halma. I like the company, but I don't like their premium valuation for the returns or perhaps the fundamental growth that they really provide. I'm tempted, if the time comes and if Argo Blockchain does continue to drop, I am tempted to transfer wealth out of the position with Halma and invest into Argo Blockchain, but I really appreciate the fact that I do have Halma in the portfolio, as it is an area where there isn't much volatility and it's quite nice to have. And seeing as they have had a fantastic run up this month and they are nearing all-time highs, I'm very much tempted to make that transfer, but that is still in decision making. I felt I would update you on that matter, as I want to be transparent about my holdings and my mindset, even if I am contradicting myself this week compared to last week with the whole cash position. If you're interested in my net worth revealed and how I track it, click the card at the top right of the video. Thank you for watching. I'm Osborne Foreman. That's Keith with an EEF. Have a fantastic day.